People of the internet, welcome to Atheist Edge. And I am today joined by Kyle Adams and Malavia. Welcome, guys. How's it going?
What's up, guys?
So, Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed your debate today. Want to let everybody in the audience know that if you want to have a conversation with us, you can just hit the join link in the description, and we will be here 5 minutes per person, unless if there's a line. If not, then whatever. And we'll let the YouTube members and Patreons members, if you're there, you can stay on as long as you'd like. So yeah, Kyle, let's get to talking, I guess.
Okay.
So we are atheists. Malavia is a supporter of the channel, so I know he's an atheist. I guess the biggest question I want to ask you is, what do you think was the best reason you gave for why there is a God today?
Well, I defined God as just people in general. And so I believe in a God because I exist. That was my opening statement right there. I exist and I am defined as a God. So.
Okay. So you are a God.
An embryo. I'm not. Yeah.
You're a God embryo.
A child of God. I am a child of God. That's the core doctrine of our church. Is one of the most basic principles. I am a child of God.
And what is a God?
What is a God? I'd say God is a person with extreme potential. Okay, at our level, we've got extreme potential to learn and grow and develop, and a God, you could call that our species, right? That's one way of describing it. You could call a God a great leader. That's one way the Bible describes us as being leaders, and some people are better leaders than others. So that's a really diverse word, and yeah. We could go open up dictionary.com and I can read off a bunch of those too. And kind of look at different ways people can qualify as some of those different definitions. And so, when it comes to organizing the world, man can't get enough of that, right?
Okay. Yeah, I got some thoughts, but I'm going to let Malavia respond to that if he'd like to. Oh, you know what? I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
How about now?
Yep, all good.
Okay. I haven't heard that argument before. Pretty interesting. I don't agree with it. I didn't get a chance.
You don't believe that we exist?
I believe we exist, but I don't believe that we're gods. By your definition, Eddie Hall would be a god because he's the strongest man in the world.
Yeah.
Would I say he's a god? No. Would I say he's incredibly strong? Yes. But that doesn't mean he's a god.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you watched the show or not.
I didn't. I didn't get a chance to.
Okay, so that's why. So we just kind of go with definitions. Okay, so I've got the word God, and I defined it using the Bible. Okay, the Bible as a dictionary, it uses a word and then it gives it a context. And it said the Bible very plainly said that we are the offspring of God, and so that makes us all divine in nature. And so we have that kind of potential with us, and we can do what we want with it. But it says, my point was that it goes two ways. When it says that we are the offspring of God, it says a whole lot about our Heavenly Father, and then it also says a whole lot about us. And so, it's not just a one-way description. It defines us, and it also defines our Heavenly Father.
So by that rationale, the child of a god would also be a god. Well, Hercules was a child of a god, but he wasn't a god. He was a demigod. He was still human. He could still die. He could still feel pain.
Yeah, we all die. That's all part of life. Yeah, but that doesn't make us not gods unless you specifically invent parameters around the definition of God. And so if you create these parameters and say, okay, a god is someone who can't die. Okay, someone who is immortal and can never die. And now all of a sudden you've got to adjust the definition of God around that. And so, that's my kind of, if you want to say that there is no God, you have to define this God that you don't believe in. And then you have to say what parameters that definition has. And so what expectations do you have of this God that you don't believe in? Does that make sense?
Not really.
Okay. If you want to say there is no God, you have to say what kind of God you don't believe in. Okay, you have to define what you're saying. There is no God. Okay, what does that God that you don't believe in mean?
So if we define God as a cup of coffee, I believe that God exists. If we would define a God as, anything else besides an omnipotent, omniscient, eternal being, then I say they exist, right? Anything that is obviously extant, I would agree with, right? But the idea of omniscience, omnipotence, and eternality in the mind are, I think, logical contradictions to each other and themselves, and I just don't think that this thing is even possible to exist.
So we agree that we exist, but you don't believe that it's possible for anyone to ever become all-knowing, and so that's the kind of God that you don't believe in. So you're putting parameters around the word God, saying it's not us. That's not the kind of God you don't believe in, because you believe we exist. You just don't believe in a supreme God who is all-knowing and all-powerful, and that's it.
Right. The biggest contradiction in my mind is the eternal mind idea, but
isn't that a standard characteristic of a God? Is the God would be eternal?
That's the way we believe we are all eternal. We are all eternal beings. In order to be gods, that's we're all eternal beings.
But we're not eternal. I forget who said the famous quote, but there's a quote that says, "After you die, there's the people that remember you, and once those people die, you're gone. You're just in any kind of history books that you might have made it into. But once the last person that remembers you is gone, you're gone. So that's not eternal."
Okay. Well, is it matter and energy, maybe both, that can never be created or destroyed?
Definitely energy.
It's energy.
Energy can never be created or destroyed. So the energy that made you came from somewhere, right? And energy itself is so that's kind of eternal nature, right? Energy, by your own description here, if it can never be created or destroyed, that means energy is eternal.
Okay, but energy is not a mind. It can't think or do anything of its own volition.
Yeah, there's no sentience to energy
that you're aware of, right?
And sure, that I'm aware of.
Yeah, that you're aware of. And so that's the energy that's within us. We call that a spirit, right?
But a spirit hasn't been proven to exist at all. Energy
I just defined
proven to exist.
Okay, so here we have definitions again, and that really comes down to definitions. And so we have a spirit that makes us alive, that's within us. And so when we die, okay, our bodies stop moving, they stop functioning. Okay, that energy leaves, and so we have a spirit that makes our body alive, that energy. And so you agree that the energy is there, but we're just disagreeing about what we're calling that energy, right? So you just say that's not a spirit, and I'm saying, oh, okay, that is a spirit, but we're still talking about the same thing. We're just calling it different things.
Are you talking about your food then? Because to me, the energy that keeps me going is my food. It's the subatomic molecular fusion of oxygen and the nutrients in the food that I eat inside the cells of my body that happens to give me quote unquote energy. But that's just, the ability to do work.
Yeah. Our bodies require food to work, and our food is alive, right? It's not dead food. I guess there are dead animals that we eat, but it still has energy within it. And so, I think that gets into a much deeper philosophy that most people don't quite dive down that deep into it. But it requires energy to stay alive.
The energy that's in food is just it's calories. A Pop-Tart was never alive, but it provides with energy through calories.
Well, a Pop-Tart, I think they're made out of wheat. I hope I'm not mistaken on that, but that wheat was a living plant. It has, and I believe all plants and all animals have spirits. They all have energy, right? You can't, but if it's alive, it's got a spirit.
Well, there's plenty of synthetic foods that have never been alive, like the whole sustainable meat market. that is becoming more and more of a thing. That meat has never been alive.
How is it food? That's a concept I'm not really familiar with. I don't know enough about
I actually
that.
think that a lot of that stuff is plant-based, and so I think that would go with the alive thing. I honestly can't think of any food source that is totally inorganic. I don't know.
There's a lot when it comes to
salt,
the nature of
and,
spirit that I just don't understand, and that's okay with me. Yeah,
I don't even
maybe
think
one
sugar
day
can
I'll understand it
without life. I'm not sure.
Yeah, sugar comes from plants, and
GMOs, they're all genetically modified. Has nothing to do with stuff that was alive. It's literally created foods.
Genetically modified organisms. Those organisms are alive.
They're not organisms. It's genetically modified food.
Organisms. Though. It's not GMF.
Yeah, but it is
GMO.
definitely alive. GMOs are definitely alive.
And GMF is also a thing. It's genetically modified food. It's considered inorganic.
An inorganic food. Yeah, I'm still not familiar with this whole concept that you're talking about as these I guess that would be like a mineral. Like I guess you could call like your Flintstones vitamins. You could call that food, right? But that's not really. It's not providing any calories. I guess Flintstone vitamins, they add a lot of sugar to it, and that's where it gets energy to it. But the minerals themselves. I guess you could claim that they have energy too, because they're still.
I mean, it's an interesting question that I don't think that there are any examples of totally inorganic, non-living foodstuffs from just totally dirt, whatever, right? But that life, the ability to do work by taking in calories and then metabolizing them, that when we look at the most microscopic examples of those things don't need to consume organic material. They can subsist on just the minerals, just the whatever's in the environment. So to me, if that's where it builds up from, then it seems to indicate that there's some kind of hierarchy of eating life, but at the bottom of it eats nothing, inorganic stuff.
I've heard of water bears, but I'm not really familiar with any. I guess plants,
like bacteria, algae.
Plants.
Algae photosynthesizes, right? It just takes in sunlight, and so that's
they've
at
got
the bottom of the food chain.
They've got
right?
other creatures at the bottom of the sea that apparently I'm thinking of like the dark dwelling creatures that just are like dwell on geothermal heat, and they're able to sustain themselves on geothermal heat. Without any kind of sunlight.
I saw in this chat that somebody said they were backstage, but I don't see them back here. So I'm a little confused. But
when it comes to that stuff, I can't really verify a lot of that stuff. It's just kind of what makes sense to me, and so I can purely speculate here on that. But when it comes to the nature of the spirit and how that works, a lot of that I just don't understand.
You guys talk amongst yourselves for just a second. I'm going to try to fix this backstage link real quick. I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm just I'm Googling like, are there any foods that don't come from organic sources? Depending on the definition of organic, some of these results are saying that fungi would count, particularly mushrooms. They're not derived from animals or plants. Fermented and pickle foods, cheese.
Well, you can't make alcohol without some kind of like
most
alcohol things are come from like the sugars within the oats and the sugars within the apples, and that's kind of an essential part of making alcohol is the fermentation process, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I don't see how alcoholic beverages would fall under what I'm looking for, but cheese is a good one. It's a byproduct of a living organism, but it's not a living organism itself.
There we go.
Yeah. Exactly how much kind of residue of that energy from the host to the coming to the food. I don't know how that works exactly, but it very well could be. Like I said, there's so much when it comes to the spirit that I don't really know and understand at this point. But So this
Well,
is just
energy-
pure speculation.
Energy isn't supernatural. It's just part of the physical universe. It's not magic.
Well,
Energy isn't
yeah.
magic.
You have to define supernatural. So
Something that's not natural.
something that's not natural. So I'm not aware of anything that's not natural.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, neither are we.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, she's
So,
saying
so I understand.
energy. If you're saying supernatural, then you're saying that it is not natural, right?
It's
What-
immaterial.
do you have any examples
Yeah.
of anything that is not natural?
No, I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything exists as
Well, you believe
not
in
natural.
spirits. Spirits would be not natural.
Well,
No, I believe spirits are natural.
If
That's,
No, they're
if
not.
spirits do exist, they would be considered natural because they're in the natural world. So
Yeah.
if
Yep.
if we want to play
Right.
around with the definition of natural, I mean, I guess we can. But I'd like to ask Kyle a couple questions regarding his faith, or I guess belief system, because you said something kind of interesting earlier. You said there are an infinite amount of souls. Are there an infinite amount of gods as well?
as far as I'm aware, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like basically to me what you're saying is that reality is basically an infinite causal series, right? There's an infinite chain of infinite realities which has no beginning or no end.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and so would you say that's logically possible?
I don't see any way it could be impossible at this point.
Oh, well,
Yeah, I don't see
maybe.
opposition
Well,
to
I'll
it
try
either.
to convince you. I'll try to win you over here. So there's an experiment called the Grim Reaper paradox, right?
Okay.
And basically how it works is this. Okay, so it's midnight, it's 12 a.m., and you're alive. But at 1 o'clock, a Grim Reaper will come and swing his scythe and kill you, or whatever. A god will come and swing his scythe and kill you, or something will transpire in an infinite reality, one of the infinite realities, and you'll be dead, right?
Okay.
But if you're not dead, then at 12:45, Grim Reaper will come and kill you. And if you're not dead then at 12:15, a Grim Reaper will come and kill you. And it goes down and down and down in an infinite
So if
series.
the Grim Reaper comes to kill you, and there's a chance that he might not kill you, and on that chance that he might not kill you, then it just gets delayed. Is that right?
It's actually the opposite way around, because what I'm trying to demonstrate is that, right, this is going to go down and down and down infinitely, but by the time it reaches 1 o'clock, you're definitely dead.
Okay. It's kind of a hard one to see without pictures. It's a hard one to visualize. Yeah.
Well, it's not really about visual, but it's saying an infinite causal series seems logically impossible to me, right? Because again, by the time you've reached 1 o'clock, it's definitely dead, and we can all die at some time.
I'm trying to draw the comic in my life, just kind of draw it as like a comic book splash page, and to understand what you're talking about, and I'm having difficulty picturing what you're talking about in my mind.
Well, this isn't really a visual platform. The thing is, between 12 and 1, you have something as you could say an infinite amount of chances to be killed, right? Let's say there's a 50% chance he kills you at 1, and there's a 50% chance he kills you at 12:30, and there's a 50% chance that he kills you at 12:15, and there's a 50% chance he kills you.
We're kind of
at
flipping coins here.
7.5, and so on and so forth, right? By the time it reaches 1, because it's infinite, you're definitely dead. Do you acknowledge this?
If it's infinite, you're definitely dead. So out of all of infinity, there's no possible way that the coin toss could land on heads every single time for all infinity. Is that
Well,
right?
no, because it's infinite.
Yeah, so that means I don't see how. Okay, the Grim Reaper's coming to kill you, but it's not really sure if it is. And so, as I see it, okay, if as long as it's infinite, it's still just simply a 50-50 chance.
Well,
I
the
think
thing
I've
is,
heard this a
it's a-
different way before.
yeah, maybe if you want to go ahead and give an alternate explanation, I'm happy for it.
Yeah, so the way that I've heard this, I've heard it as saying, like, we'll go by your same general example of time-based, because the whole thing is time-based. So say at it's midnight right now. At 1 o'clock, at midnight, I'm hungry, and I'm gonna make food at 1 o'clock. At 12:30, I'm like, okay, I can either make the food now and save myself some time, or I can just wait half of the remaining time. That would push it to 12:45. Do I want to make the food now, or do I want to wait half of the time? So now I'm at 12:52:50. And then it keeps cutting down infinitely into smaller and smaller halves, so there's no possible way to get to the end of my time limit of 1 a.m.
So that is a related example, but maybe let's try to bring it back here, right? Because in an infinite amount, if we have an infinite amount of gods and an infinite amount of realities in which certain things can happen, well, when we're measuring it by some kind of dimension, we are using time in that example. It seems like something would happen to cut us off before we're even begin, because it is infinite, right? That's the whole point of this. That's why I say an infinite causal series is logically impossible, because it seems to me that the causal series either gets cuts off before it even begins, or sorry, not before it begins, but there is no beginning to it, or we do. That's the logical contradiction here.
I'm not seeing the contradiction myself. I don't see a problem with having an infinite series.
Well, it's because when you divide an hour into infinity and you have a certain outcome, that outcome is guaranteed to hit once you hit 1 o'clock.
But I don't see what the problem is with an infinite series of time events going past. I just don't see the problem.
Yeah, Samurai, it sounds like you're saying that there's a problem with infinity because infinity has an ending, and if it has an ending, therefore it can't be infinity. And
not an ending, but things are going to happen that is going to make the infinite contradict itself logically
by ending. So if infinity has a contradiction, it has to end. It can't be infinity.
There's no logical contradiction with infinite sets.
Maybe not an infinite set of numbers.
A sequence of events is a set.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not explaining it very well. That's
okay.
That's fair to point out. But I don't see how I could be much clearer with this, right? We can have an infinite set of numbers, but that too has a paradox, right? Because if you take 1.1 and go to 1.2 and 1 or whatever 1.11 and 1.12 and so on and so forth, you can never really reach 2, right? Because you have different sets of
you do reach 2
within. Exactly, right? That's the contradiction. Right. That's the
1/2 plus 1/4. That infinite series equals, it will sum up to 1. 1/2 plus 1/3 plus, and so on. That infinite series, the sum of that infinite series is 1.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can subdivide it an infinite amount to even get to 1/2. You'd have to progress from 0 to 1/2, which is an infinity in itself, right?
Yeah, I just don't see the problem. You can imagine the number line, right? From infinite negative infinity to positive infinity with 0 in the middle. I'm just not seeing the logical difficulty with that.
The difficulty is that it starts and ends in infinite places, right? So yes,
the number line doesn't start. It doesn't start. It doesn't end.
It doesn't end.
No, depending on where you draw the line. The number line itself does not start and does not end, but you can pick 2 arbitrary places. Well, you can pick 2 arbitrary places on the number line, and that too will have an infinite amount of values between them.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing
my thing is
P
that,
or not P. What's the P or not P?
The what?
A contradiction is a state of P and not P.
Yeah. The idea that you can reach point A, but you have to go through an infinite amount of dimensions to reach point A, I guess, is the contradiction.
Yes, not a contradiction. It's just what the sum of an infinite series is.
Okay,
if all things that exist begin to exist, then that which does not begin to exist does not exist.
Okay.
Huh? Okay.
I don't know about this,
It's a
but
if. It's a conditional.
okay.
We don't know.
I don't understand Kyle's concept of God, because I don't see that. I think he really needs to show or to demonstrate in some way his premise that we are all gods. I think the argument as it is seems valid. We are all gods. We exist, therefore gods exist. That's a valid argument, but I don't think I accept the premise that we are
Okay.
gods.
Well, I've got two
I don't
hands.
accept that.
I do a lot of painting and drawing and painting portraits. I do some sculpting. I'm a creator. I am a creator, and mankind, that's kind of the way we're designed. We are designed to be creators, and
That's
yeah.
begging the
So
question.
we try to control every little tiny thing we can get our hands on. People are trying to control the weather right now and trying to come up with all kinds of different
What's a
inventions
god?
to try and do that.
I'm not seeing the god part. What is? How are we gods?
We are creators, is my statement here.
Yeah,
so
that's.
being a
I don't
creator kind of.
see. I don't see that that's a god. I'm a creator. Yeah, I'm not a god.
Okay, well, this is just kind of a definition, and so yeah, the Bible said that we are the offspring of God. That makes us God. So the Bible just said that we are gods, and
Well,
so
that's
it's
begging the
using a
question.
word and then it's defining what it means by that.
Yeah, that's
word.
Kyle. That's begging the question. That's begging
okay.
the question.
Okay, so what is not?
I
a
am
god?
a.
What's that?
What is not a god? What living
What
thing
is
is
not
not a
God?
god? If all
What
things
living
are created
thing-
by God, all things are God's. All living things are God's offspring. So that means the ants, the rodents, all of it are God's too.
No. Never said that ants and dogs and sheep were the offspring of God. They were never given that title.
So
Never
it's a
given
title,
the title.
not a fact of
So,
your existence.
yeah.
So what
I
is
thought
it
that was
that makes
the
us?
fact
What
that
is?
we made us.
Yeah. What
So-
is the property that makes us gods that we possess?
Well, this really comes down to just the language, okay? And so we have a lot of different languages out there, and so one person might call this a book, another person calls it a libro, yeah, depending on the language. And so we are able to communicate. And so if I put on a hat, I can call it a hat. Someone else is going to call it a sombrero.
What is the property that we all share that makes it the case that we are gods?
What is the property that we all share that makes it a case that we are gods? And so gods is just a title that is used. And so because
So we're not really gods, it's just an arbitrary definition.
Well, it sounds like he was saying creation earlier, right?
creator is one of the titles. And I also described leader. Being a leader can be defined as a god. Being a judge, sometimes that happened in the Bible. It talked about judges and calling them gods. And so
all right, so I could call anything. I could call anything a god then.
You are more
It's
than
just
welcome
a
to
title.
call anything a god.
So
it's a
you're
word, and you
Yeah.
decide to call. Okay, so we
Right.
have an
So-
observation, we have a thing, and we describe that thing in different ways. And
right.
so someone
Butterflies are
decides
pretty.
to call
Butterflies are pretty. I call them god.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you're more than welcome to do that. Okay, in this case, I just said, okay, the Bible is looking at an observation. It's looking at a bunch of people, and it is describing these people using
Right.
this word. They're
Right.
putting a
Right.
title on
It's
the
an
people.
arbitrary designation that you just made up. Got
Yeah,
it.
just like
Yeah.
the bug that you're calling a
So-
butterfly. It is
right.
the name that you've given the
Right.
butterfly.
It's an
something that you
arbitrary
chose.
It's an arbitrary designation that has no actual reality to it. Right.
That is
Right. It's just
it's
a
just a-
title.
title, okay?
Titles are just arbitrary things.
Yeah. So
Right.
just like So
Right.
Or
we have
I'd say
butterflies.
you
It's a
can-
name.
They're fiction. It's a title is a fiction, isn't it?
It probably goes even a little further than this, because it sounds like what Kyle is saying is that God is a title or a word that can apply to all reality and all aspects of it. Kyle, correct me if I got this wrong, but do you acknowledge that when you call reality and all aspects of it God, then the idea of God loses all meaning?
I think if everything is God, then it would, yeah, it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like saying matter. Does the word matter have any meaning? It's
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
yeah. So I think that answers your
Everything-
question.
Matter is real. Titles, arbitrary distinctions are not. They're not
So-
real.
It's just a name, right? Matter
Right,
is
right.
just a name. So
No,
you
matter is
can-
not just a name. It corresponds to something.
Yeah. And so in this instance, when he's talking about describing everything, okay, as something, giving a name to everything, we have a name for everything, and we call that name matter, right? And so,
Well, technically,
No,
no. There's
um,
matter and energy, right? Technically, so no.
so matter isn't everything.
No, it's not.
Maybe it's all tangible things. I don't know.
So
So
it's a certain class particles that have mass, basically.
So there's such a thing as, at least theoretically, at least in theory, and this is relevant when we're talking about language, there's such a thing as antimatter, right? What I'm not hearing from you, Kyle, is there such a thing as an anti-God? Or is there something outside of the set of things that are God?
Well, we haven't
Well,
gotten to his definition of a God yet. So far, all I'm hearing are word definitions, word games, fictions.
I'm not playing any word games.
Yes, you are. You admit that you are. You admit it's just an arbitrary fictional designation. You admit that.
It's a word in the dictionary. Okay, just
don't
like
care.
every word in the dictionary.
Yeah, it's an arbitrary fiction, right?
An arbitrary fiction.
God
like
is
human?
a God is an arbitrary fiction.
Is human an arbitrary fiction? If you want to say human is an
human is not an arbitrary fiction. No.
Okay, well, I equate it with human. Okay, you want to say human, I want to say God. It's the same. They're synonyms.
Homo sapiens. So hominids. Yeah. Hominids are God.
They're synonyms for me. Okay, that's it. Human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have
said
no
it was
reason.
The creative potential, right?
Yeah, I have no reason to think that hominids are God. Why should I think
that's totally okay. I'm just saying that this is my definition and this is the word that I go by. If you don't agree with it, that is totally okay.
Well, you're just making things up. That's literally what you're doing, and you pretty much literally are admitting that you are just making these up.
I'm just making things up.
Yes.
I told you that it's not coming from me.
It is.
You got that, right? So am I the one making things up?
Yes.
You're the only one that I've ever heard make this argument, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Well, this comes directly from the Bible. If you watch the show, I'd point out every instance. Show. Okay. So you watched the show. You heard it.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not just me saying this. Yeah. Okay. But this is,
a Bible,
the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah. A book says a thing that doesn't make it true.
Well, that's the dictionary, and I agree with you. Just because a book says
dictionaries don't make things true. Dictionaries record usage. They do not record that things are true.
I agree.
So it's not necessarily true that we are gods. That is simply your usage.
That is my usage. Yes.
Yes. Arbitrary and complete.
Me saying so fiction. Doesn't make it so, except for by my own authority. And
so, you're just choosing for idiosyncratic reasons to call human beings gods.
I'm choosing to do so, for my own reasons.
Idiosyncratic, right?
I don't know what that means, but okay.
It just means particular to you and your beliefs.
Particular to me and my beliefs, yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So if you want to say humans, we both agree that humans exist. So
what about devils?
So,
what about devils and demons? Are they gods?
Well, they come from the same source, and they just choose to not fall. They choose not to make the same choices. Okay, and so, the Bible does call them gods. It says Satan is the god of this world, and that's kind of why it's in such a kind of a wicked state right now.
Oh, so whether or not you're a god is dependent on the choices that you make.
I just said that Satan. The Bible calls Satan a god.
Do you have any evidence?
He's not a good God.
Do you have evidence for Satan or for your deity that the person that you say is flesh and blood? Do you have any evidence for this person?
Let's talk about that.
Okay, so in the show we talked about the word evidence and about how the word evidence really needs to be defined. So
I mean,
I mean
scientific evidence.
scientific evidence. Okay. So
Yeah.
scientific evidence is something that you can observe and test, right?
No.
But also
no,
the
just a
fever
minute.
example. The fever example is also scientific evidence.
No, it's not. Scientific
So-
evidence is evidence that would tend to either confirm or disconfirm a theory or hypothesis.
Okay. So it sounds to me like you believe science proves things.
No,
It disconfirms.
science does
But-
not. Science disconfirms, right? So we would have evidence
Okay.
for a theory, and then if we get positive evidence, right, then that would lend support to, or be, it would confirm, but it wouldn't necessarily prove that our theory was true. We could have evidence that would falsify our theory, but we can't have evidence that would prove it.
Okay, so this is sounding more and more like the example of the fever, right? Talking about the fever as in the dictionary definition example. Okay, my daughter's head felt warm. I figured, oh, she might have a fever, but I don't really know for sure because my hand might just be cold and maybe she doesn't have a fever. And so
Yeah, you use a thermometer or one of those.
yes, and that's why we use that.
Yeah, that would tend to
double
support.
check. Okay.
Right, that would support the theory that she has a fever, but it doesn't.
But you don't know for
prove-
sure. Yes.
Right,
yes, and
she
that's what I'm
might
talking
not
about
have. She
evidence.
might just be warm.
Yeah, and that's definition 2 of evidence, I believe. Is definition 2 is the one that talks about yeah, we don't know for sure. This is a sign or indication that this might be the case, though we don't know for sure that is the case.
Okay,
Right.
so let's create another class of evidence then. Let's grant that all that is quote unquote
Evidence by definition 1 is proof. Proof is
No.
evidence number 1.
Whoa.
Evidence is not
number
proof.
2 is not proof.
Evidence.
No,
not
evidence
proof.
is not
Why would
proof,
we have the
Kyle.
same word? Why we have two different words for the same thing like that? Like,
Okay, I'm going to dictionary.com right now.
even if
and
that is
Don't
the
care
case,
about dictionaries.
it's not
Don't
helpful.
care about dictionaries. I hate
Even if that is the
dictionaries.
case, it's not helpful, right? If we use the two concepts synonymously, then there's no point in having both words, right? So let's just say that proof is not evidence. Evidence is
Okay, so
indicative.
you want to go
but
with
proof is
definition 2.
conclusive.
Definition 2 is what you're talking
Compelling.
about. And so, yeah, I only open up because I want to be making sure we're using the same verbiage and same language.
Let's say compelling evidence.
So that way we don't confuse the definitions. Okay, so it's
Right,
really easy
so-
to confuse the different definitions.
Evidence would be a state of affairs that would tend to support or confirm a theory or a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And do you have such evidence of your God?
Yes.
I'd like to see it. Do you
Compelling.
have a photograph? Do you have a photograph?
I don't have a photograph.
Pictures, recordings, signatures, any
Yeah.
kind of records,
Well,
anything, right?
I have a
So
lot of
let's talk
records.
about
Yes.
the strength
And not
of
hearsay.
testimonial
Not
evidence.
hearsay. Not hearsay.
Okay. So it's got to be evidence. It's got to be photographic evidence, but testimonies
be-
aren't evidence.
It has testimony. Yes,
That's-
anecdotes
well-
are not evidence.
Yeah, and it depends on how we define the word. That's why we went back and
Yeah.
forth on it for a while. The
Yeah.
thing is, one of the things that, in my view, underlies a proper scientific critique is Occam's razor. Kyle, don't you think your example of the rain and your example of the fever violates Occam's razor?
Being the simplest explanation for it, I don't see how it would.
Yeah.
Well, here's how.
Mm.
Here's how it would go. So if I was given two possible explanations for the rain stopping when I went outside and coming on when I went inside, and repeating that process a few times, I have two different explanations available to me. One is that the rain starts and stops. The rain is in the atmosphere and it starts and stops at times that we can kind of predict, but not really. And it can do that intermittently because it's part of a weather system. And the second one is that there's an infinite series of gods out there who use divine powers that we don't understand to start and stop the rain when I go inside and outside. I'm going to pick the first one. Why? Because it involves less assumptions about things I can't perceive. But
So
you pick the second one.
I take the second one, yeah, because of the preponderance of
Yeah,
evidence.
so
context surrounding it.
Yeah, so Occam's razor says we should not multiply theoretical entities beyond necessity, right? And so we don't need to invoke a an immaterial or invisible being to explain rain when coincidence explains it just as well. We're multiplying entities.
Multiplying entities.
Yes.
You're doing more explanatory work for no reason, it seems like.
I'm doing more explanatory work for no reason.
What was your hypothesis about the rain anyway?
There was no hypothesis about the rain except for what caused it. It was just, yeah.
Well, what causes rain is the humidity, right? The humidity reaches a certain point, and
what caused it to stop? Okay, what caused it to stop every time I stepped outside?
Did it stop every time you stepped outside?
Every time I stepped outside.
Did you get wet
the entire day?
Did you get wet at all? Not one drop. Not one drop.
Well, we were riding our bikes, and our bikes.
Not one. Was there any rain in the air at all?
It stopped raining. That's what happened the entire day.
So you didn't get wet at all. Not one drop. Not one drop fell from the sky. Coats,
it stopped.
Even if I were to believe you,
I'm
and I guess I don't see no reason.
And you don't have to believe me. It's not your experience. It's my experience.
Yeah. Okay. Well, even if let's just say I do believe you, isn't a simpler explanation for this that, well, we have a weather system where humidity concentrates at certain points that doesn't necessarily have to be collective, that we can observe empirically. How is that not a more simple explanation? How is that an explanation that doesn't do more work than, well, there's an infinite series of gods and they caused this to happen?
You kind of were really wordy about that, and it was kind of hard for me to follow.
Okay, so again, even if I were to believe again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Even if I were to believe your thing, right? We have two explanations, right? We have one, we can observe weather systems. We have condensation that concentrates in certain points in the air and makes it rain, right? And we can see this. We know it to be true. That's explanation one.
And all of that should not be dependent upon me whatsoever. I should be an independent variable in that matter.
Yeah, I don't see why.
Apparently, you were very much a variable in that matter.
That's exactly.
Yeah,
that's why it's so significant.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what accounts for that? What accounts for that? God changed the weather just for you?
That's exactly how it appears.
For you.
That's how it appears.
Just for you. The whole world arranged itself for your convenience.
That's part of the miracle.
Doesn't that make you mad?
Why would it make me mad?
I mean, just for a moment, contemplate all the horrors that is happening at this very moment, right? All the people that are being harmed in the most literally unspeakable ways on YouTube. There's a certain number of those people are praying for God's help, for God's relief from that suffering, and there are so many miracles that could be done that would just make it unimpeachable that God is real, that He could intervene in those ways. He could make limbs grow back. He could make congenital defects be like they never happened, right? Those things would be much greater evidence, but He's using His infinite power to stop the rain for you. And just have empathy for those people that are praying for God's help right now. Like, shouldn't that make you mad that He's using His power to do that instead of curing somebody who's suffering so horribly?
No, it means He's special. It means He's special.
I'm not the only one who's had experiences
special
like
in the
this
eyes
before.
of God. God loves him so much, He's willing to alter the physics of the universe just for Kyle.
Well,
I missed this. This is something that came up in the debate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how long ago was this that happened?
When he was a kid riding his bikes?
No, I was on my mission at the time. I was.
Oh, okay. I thought
19
since
or
you were
20.
riding bikes.
5 years ago, 10 years ago.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was around 2010, maybe.
Okay, so the first iPhone came out in 2007. You didn't think it'd be a good idea to pull out a phone and record this supposed miracle?
I didn't have a phone like that. We had one phone. Yeah, that was back before.
Do you know what confirmation bias and pareidolia are, right? I mean,
yes, I know what that is.
Yes, pareidolia. So this is just, I think, it's just pareidolia. Dolia. You were looking. You're an overactive agent detector, right? So you saw a pattern and you attributed agency to a pattern in the natural world. That's just what happened, right?
I saw a
That's
pattern.
Yes.
I saw a pattern. Yes, and that was.
And you
every time-
attributed agency to it, meaning you attribute it to a God, right?
Yes, because
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
That's the simplest explanation.
Yeah.
Occam's razor goes.
No,
with
it's
the
not the
simplest-
simplest. The simplest is that we don't attribute agency to natural events. I don't think that because I don't think that I don't think that because the lightning struck so and so's house that God was mad at them. It just happened.
Okay, so you in this instance of you're trying to say that it's simpler to say that it
Yes.
just appeared that
appeared
like,
to you.
everything.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you're
I mean,
more
that's-
than
I
welcome
think
to think that.
It's
You're
a
more
big
than
problem
welcome
when
to
we
think
use the word simple, because simple is not part of the Occam's razor in the reality. It's not about how simple or complex it is. It's about multiplying the entities unnecessarily, which means like if you know about a certain number of entities, you have knowledge of them, right? So there's no reason to posit to just out of nowhere fabricate or believe that there is another entity without a reason. So like
Yeah.
if my vape falls out of my hand right now, right? There's only one entity in this room, me, right? So I'm the most likely explanation for why my vape falls out of my hand. But
Mhm.
it would be unnecessary for me to multiply those entities and say, oh, well, there's probably a clone version of me or something, whatever kind of crazy stuff I could make up in my head, you know?
People used to believe in house fairies and gremlins and things. They would attribute it to little things that would happen around the house, you know, things falling or other things happening around the house, and they would attribute them to elves and fairies and brownies and goblins and all those kinds of things. But today we don't think that. We think that these are just either coincidences. They're just coincidences. We don't think that. Yeah, we don't think that lightning is trying to hurt people. We don't think that floods are trying to drown people. These are just natural events.
The house elf thing, that's exactly where the elf on the shelf idea came from.
Yeah, I'm thinking about an experience I had the other day where I was just in my bathroom the other day, and all of a sudden a bottle just falls to the floor, and it just moves on. I was like, why did that happen? Like I can't think of any reason why that happened, but and so people can try to speculate a lot of different reasons as to why that
tiny vibration. There can be tiny vibrations, and it was just slippery enough, and over a period of time, it got closer and closer to the edge until it fell.
When it wasn't even near the edge before.
Yeah, I don't know the situation.
Weird little things that happen.
Yeah,
and
but
you can write it off as a coincidence.
Yeah,
but
houses
the thing
settle.
is, I just
houses
don't know what the cause was.
Yeah, houses settle. They make sounds on their own because the building itself, the structure itself, will settle, will shift and move. Yeah, so these things can happen.
Yeah, there are things that happen, and we don't always know the answer as to why they happened. And
but the most reasonable supposition is that they are just coincidences. It's not reasonable. I don't believe to attribute them to unseen spirits like poltergeists or fairies or brownies or other things like that.
You're welcome to go with whatever you think there. Yeah, it's your whole thing. So,
that's called science and reason.
Okay,
right? What you're talking about is superstition.
I'd call it rational thinking and irrational thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's. I think there's a lot of presupposition that kind of goes into play here.
Yes, there is. It's a presupposition towards how things are best explained.
And so I think it's kind of gets you're boiling things right down to what science is and whether or not science proves things in the beginning. Okay,
it doesn't.
I think that's kind of what it boils down to. And so you want to say that you can't prove that cats eat food? Go for it.
I think I can.
You think cats? It can be proven that some cats eat food.
I can give overwhelming evidence the preponderance of evidence.
Okay, so you agree with me that science does prove things?
No, I said overwhelming. I didn't say proof.
Okay, so I think that's
Proof in colloquial sense. Proof in the colloquial sense simply means overwhelming evidence for. That's what people usually mean. They don't mean absolute certainty.
Conflating proof in the logical sense versus the sort
Yeah.
of layman's way. But I
Yeah.
mean, we're kind of going around in circles here. If I
think
could,
hitting the heart of the matter there is whether or not science proves anything.
I think it doesn't.
I think science confirms things, but actually, I kind of want to shift the topic maybe off the debate for a moment and ask Kyle and Kaz, because I'm curious about both of you. Kaz, I remember on one of your streams you told a story about how you were in the army, kind of not quite the inverse of Kyle's story, but sort of opposite, where you had grown up a Christian, you were in the army, and your experience with the army, I don't know if you actually saw combat, but maybe your experience with that convinced you away from Christianity and made you become an atheist. Kyle, it seems like you had the opposite experience. It seems that your experience in the military service actually confirmed your belief in faith and things. I'd be curious to hear from both of you, like which experience was it, or what kind of changed your mind in your military service that made you come to such different points today.
You want to take that one first, Kyle, or you want me to go first?
Go for it.
So I think I've said before that it wasn't the deployment that put the final nail in the coffin, but it was the most significant influence. For me, that influence comes from something like survivor's guilt, where I don't see how it makes sense for the people that I watched die to die while I lived, because I'll just be honest, like I was a hoe, okay? Like I was a bad guy, I was a douchebag in many ways, and I did not deserve to live compared to some of those other guys. Like there was this one guy who was our driver for our ambulance for a little bit. He went home for mid-tour leave, met his child for the first time, brand new baby, came back and died the next day.
That's terrible. God, that's horrible.
So yeah, I can't square that circle. There are people that it makes sense to me that I could live and they could die, and if it was for me to live to spread God's word, hey, that's not going to happen.
So, as I understand it, okay, you kind of have this expectation of what God is supposed to be in your minds, and then all of a sudden, God didn't meet that expectation that you set for yourself, and so because God doesn't meet that expectation, therefore you don't believe that God exists. And
no, not therefore. That wasn't the last step. So like I said, the final nail in the coffin was me going to Christian college. That was when I totally became an atheist. But that is what calls it into question.
Okay.
Wow.
I love you, Kaz.
Thank you. But it's not that it proves that God does not exist. It just gave me pause to say, maybe I'm not so sure that he exists. Maybe I should go find out.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think that was kind of what reinforced your expectations. This is the way God is supposed to be. I'm not seeing this God meeting these expectations, and therefore this God can't exist. And so, it makes sense to me. And so this is kind of where I have a completely different set of expectations. And because I have a different expectations, I see God as a plausible entity.
Do you think is your God like the Christian God, which is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent? The three omnis, or is yours different?
Well, okay. I think we have to look at the word Elohim here. Okay, Elohim and Godhead and the way that functions. Okay, and so Elohim is the collection of the gods. Okay, and so this is them working as a whole. And before we talked about God as an infinite being. Okay, there's an infinite number of gods, right? And so if with this infinite number of different levels of progression and understanding, okay, that collective knowledge right there, that is what I call that collective knowledge of infinity. That is omnipotence, because
that's omniscience. That's omniscience. Is it also omnipotent?
When that collective power to, I'd call that, as far as I'm aware. But
and then also all loving too, or maybe not so much.
Well, I wouldn't call.
Maybe sometimes God's a dick.
We have different categories. We have different categories. So, like I said, there's people. We've got different people out there. Not every person is all loving, right? Not every person is, all evil either. And so there's a lot of different variances with that. And so we have kind of team A and team B. And in order to be the most excellent, you have to be all loving, but that doesn't mean, team B can't exist. They both coexist. And, there's no poofing things into existence, but at the same time, also, there's no eliminating things from existence. Kind of, there's in order for good to exist, there also has to exist an evil. They two.
No, I don't.
One can't be defined without the other.
I've never understood
I think what
that.
Brenda is getting at is not that they can't exist simultaneously. We don't know, but that they can't exist simultaneously in the same mind, whether that's a divine mind or a regular one. And actually, it's kind of confusing to hear you talk about, and correct me on that if I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting Brenda, but it's kind of confusing to hear you talk about how God is an infinite collection of knowledge and experience across supposedly an infinite amount of time. Is there a mind behind that? Is there any sentience? Is there any driving force? Because even then, even within your own framework, it seems it's not really internally consistent then. I mean, we're kind of going back to Occam's razor here, but it seems like it's making a whole that's more than some of its parts.
There's a lot here that even I don't understand, and I can speculate a lot of things here, and I can kind of speculate us all being cells within one giant body, and I can imagine that, and that's kind of the way I see a government itself. Does a government have a mind?
Yeah,
we're all cells within a government, right?
Yeah, I'm team Gryffindor. Yeah, so, I can imagine that. I can imagine it.
So, hey Wesley, we have a new person on the
team. The United States themselves is its own it's a multicellular organism, right? That's the United States. Is one multicellular organism, and you can.
It just seems like you can just explain an awful lot. It seems really ad hoc to me. It seems like a really ad hoc explanation.
Well, this is just my understanding of the United States themselves as a whole.
I mean, for your God, I was just wondering if I was going to be able to run the urethral dilemma, whether that applies to Mormons.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying. Urethral.
Oh, the Euthyphro dilemma. But before you get on that, before you explain that, let's just say hi to Wesley.
But if it doesn't even work,
hi Wesley.
Hi. How are those two healed teeth in your mouth that Jesus put there? Are they still there, and you're brushing them every day? I hope.
What?
Okay. So the Euthyphro dilemma, Brenda. You're gonna.
Well, I was curious if it would even work, because if his God doesn't satisfy the three omnis, then I don't know if it would be easy to run that. You know what I mean, Kaz?
Yeah,
it makes sense.
So, I think there's kind of a lot there, and I've got to find out where you're getting this expectation from in the first place. And,
the urethral is the idea that I don't think I can put it in the original language. I don't have it memorized. But basically, if God is all knowing, all loving, and all powerful, then that it's hard to explain the suffering and the evil that we experience in the world. Is the problem of suffering the problem of evil? And I don't know if that's.
I think the Book of Mormon describes that the very best out of anywhere else I've ever seen.
I can tell you the answer to that easily. The suffering and the evil things that are happening, that's people that are away from Jesus. Jesus isn't helping them out.
Well, that's the normal Christian response, but Kyle is a Mormon, and so I'm not.
Well, we also consider ourselves to be Christian, so we believe
I know
in
you
Jesus.
do, but if you have like a committee of gods, it strikes me as maybe more difficult to run that argument. I'm not sure.
I don't know why it would be more difficult to run.
Well, then
I'm all confused on your reasoning.
Well, because it really depends on the contrast between an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful deity and the presence of suffering. The two are not commensurable. It's difficult to explain them. Christians have ways of trying to explain them. I think that they all fail, but I've never run it with a Mormon, so I'm just really unsure.
This is a 2nd Nephi chapter 2 example, and the Book of Mormon explains it better than anywhere else I've said where I've seen it. It says, this is 2nd Nephi chapter 2 verses 11 through 14. It says, "For it must needs be that there is an opposition in all things. If not so, righteousness could not be brought to pass, neither wickedness, neither holiness nor misery, neither good nor bad. Wherefore all things must be needs be a compound in one. Wherefore, if it should be one body, it must remain as dead, having no life, neither death, nor corruption, nor incorruption, happiness, nor misery, neither sense nor insensibility. In order to have happiness, you must also have misery. There is no way of defining what happiness is unless you know what misery is.
I don't understand that. I think I can be happy without suffering.
Is
If
happiness
you don't know
a chemical?
Okay. Well, it's kind of
All right.
there. It's an opposition. Okay, you can't define happiness without being able to have an opposite word. Does that make sense? The two, in order, that's kind of the way it is.
I think I can still be happy and not be suffering.
If you've never ever hurt yourself, you can't know what pain is, and so
that would be good.
Yeah, it'd be nice, but it's kind of
be good. It would be not bad.
And it's this whole concept of not recognizing happiness.
Do you have a heaven? Do you have a heaven like the traditional Christian heaven? Is there suffering? Is there suffering in that heaven?
Is there suffering in heaven when we cry for those who are experiencing like pain here on earth? And so we can cry for like the wickedness of man. There's times when angels have wept and they're in heaven. So there's definitely some kind of suffering in that way. And so someday when I have my own heavenly children, when I just think about that, they're going to go through a lot of hard times so they can know to recognize the happiness. And that's kind of part of individual growth. It's kind of like, I don't know, thinking about a way to describe it. What's more fun to play as a game? Okay. If you're playing video games, do you want to play a game on easy mode? Like absolute easy, there's no chance of dying whatsoever. Or do you want to play on difficult? So I think kind of the chance of failure is kind of what makes the game fun, right?
I'm playing a game on easy mode right now because I suck at it.
I do want to say goodnight to Brenda and Samari now because we do have
that's fine.
Wesley
that's
on
fine.
the stage, and I just want to.
Thank you.
We're going to be winding it down soon. I have a bunch of questions I want to read, so I want to say thank you to Brenda and Samari, both of you guys, for contributing to the conversation so much. And Brenda, I believe you have a YouTube channel, right? So if you want to send me a link to that, I can put in the description. I would love to do that.
Oh, okay. Well, it really sucks. I don't have a lot on there. I mostly
got to change that.
Okay. Yeah, I should do more. I debate flat earthers, so but I don't have a lot of content on there recently. But I'll send it.
We'll get it done. All right. Thank you so much, Brenda. Thank you so much, Samari. We appreciate it. Good night, y'all.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. Maybe quick question before I go: will you be hosting any more debates anytime soon?
I don't know when. It's only when James needs me to, but it's not like a scheduled type of thing. But whenever he needs me to, I will be there.
Okay, gotcha. I'll be looking forward to it. Thanks all. Love chatting with you. I'll see you later.
No problem. Thank you. We appreciate it. All right. So I just kicked Wesley out by accident. So Wesley, I want to address a comment that I saw in the chat real quick with you before I let you go. I wanted to ask you, is it actually the case that you are diagnosed with schizophrenia?
Yes.
And so does that affect your perceptions of Like, how does that affect your perceptions of reality?
Frustrates, interrupts,
Frustrates your perception.
and interrupts.
Are you able to? How do you differentiate hallucination from reality?
If I can put my hand on it, it's real.
You can put your hand on it.
Because I wasn't always schizophrenic, and I know what it was like when I was not, and I know what is an hallucination and what is reality, and it just
was it a specific thing that caused it?
Yeah,
like a drug or something.
Yeah, well, there's two things that caused it. In Scripture, it's written that there's an iniquity put on my shoulders that shall not be removed until the day I die. And it's also written that there's an agu. I don't know how you spell it, A-G-O-U-G-H or something like that. And that agu is a schizophrenia. The same thing was on Samson in the Bible. In our carnal world, I say it's because I was a stupid, self-serving crackhead for 20 years. And that's what physically opened me up to that disease, or destroyed me inwardly to that disease. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a prod there to help you. Braces. It's like braces. It's helping you to align yourself, right? It's kind of one of those little things in life that, okay, you need some correction, some corrective behaviors, kind of.
At its worst, it frustrates me, and I get bitter. I get frustrated. Sometimes I get verbally angry, and I cuss a little bit, and then I settle down and stop cussing, and just wait for that wave of degenerate mental state to sort of subside.
And so you said earlier that what you put your hands on, is real. So how does that relate to your faith in God?
Well, I've been attacked by supernatural, the devil, Baal, and it was much deeper and more powerful and evil than the lower level schizophrenia I had. And what happened to me?
More intense.
Yeah. I mean, I know the difference when my head is lifted as I sleep and I am shown my soul and I see a pearl of snow white light in my belly and I see the rest of my soul is dead gray ashes. That's not a hallucination. That was reality on this in the extra natural, the supernatural level. But when I hear voices that have no breath, or it's like a waterless cloud, that just tempt me all the time and seduce me and entice me and tell me just things that aren't so, and my ears aren't included in the ill communication. I know it's my problem, and it can be a very vicious one at times. I hate it. It's incredibly frustrating. It makes it that I have a difficult. I can't get a work like I used to be. I used to be a professional pianist and an exhibit designer, but I can't do that now. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad.
So I'm sorry to hear that, man. I really am.
I would not choose somebody like me to be the voice of Jesus on earth, and yet he did. So I just have to be honest. I was a wicked and evil man for many years, a crack cocaine addict, and for many years I got away with it with the nice Wonder Bread white group of co-workers, and we had our wonderful jobs and our beautiful apartments and our fantastic vacations, and I would take my paychecks and I would spend it in 2 nights on a bender and then I'd be broke for 2 weeks waiting for my next check. And I was able to pull that off for many years. And eventually it just quit being the case. You know, the boss just finally said, yeah, that's it. We got to let you go. And then that was it for me. And I ended up on the streets, and all I did was go up to people in Chicago and draw caricatures in the window of them having their champagne. And then they would give me $20 for the caricature, and I would make 20, 40, $100 a day. And as soon as I'd make $20, I'd run over to the projects and grab my crack and go into an alley and smoke my devil's dick. And then I'd get real paranoid that there was some sniper on a rooftop trying to shoot me with a laser sniper, which was totally ridiculous. And while simultaneously I was pretending I was surrounded by a bevy of beautiful women wanting to, you know, play hide the sausage in the mink coat. So it was stupid. It was just childish, idiot, evil, selfish, hateful stupidity based on me feeling pleasure. And I did that for 20 years. And then I quit. And it's been probably 14 years since I've touched the stuff, and I never looked back. So
congratulations. I really appreciate it.
And I didn't start hearing voices until 5 years after I quit the drugs. So I was hoping that by quitting the drugs, my mind would start to become repaired by the regeneration of cells. And it didn't happen like that. I started hearing the voices, and fortunately, there were some caseworkers in Chicago that got me onto Social Security insurance. So I have a steady income. And after they managed my money for a couple of years, they would pay my rent out of my checks, and they would give me $25 a week to live on. And I finally got to a healthy enough mental state where I could manage my own money. And that was maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And I've been managing myself ever since then. And I have a very nice, I'm living in a very nice, very clean, very nice apartment. But the reality of the disease is that I wake up in the morning and suddenly something is speaking intimately inside of my head that I cannot stop from speaking. And I've just gotten tired of it. Now I just pretty much slough it off as though it's some childish idiot that won't shut up.
And so the voices that you hear, can you tell me about that a little bit? Like, is it just one entity? Are there multiple? What's going on there? Like, is there are there go-to
it makes it difficult for me to tell the difference when an angel speaks or when Satan speaks. It makes it very difficult for me to tell the difference between the two. The angels, I'm not allowed to see with my eyes. I know they're there in the millions worldwide, but I'm not allowed to see them with my eyes. But I can tell you 2 instances that I believed happened worldwide that is not a schizophrenia, was a real attack by the real devil. One time, the devil attacked me and said, "I will turn and toss you violently like a ball." And when he did that, it felt like I was being electrocuted, paralyzed, could not move. And the voice was extremely vibrant and loud in my mind. But it was the devil himself, because I looked in the Bible and found scripture where Satan had perverted the words in Isaiah 22. Satan said, "I will turn and toss you violently like a ball." But scripture is, "The Lord shall turn and toss thee violently like a ball, and carry thee away into a large country. There thou shalt die. There the chariots of thy glory shall be the shame of the Lord's house." Well, Satan didn't put all that in there. Satan said, "I'm God, I will turn and toss you violently like a ball." And I was paralyzed. There was no freedom in it. It was paralytic. Sleep apnea, some would call it, I guess. But that happened October 10th, 2005. And then Satan did that again, but he couldn't get into me the next time when he said, "Don't tell the vision," on March 31st in the year 2020. Now, Satan he put those thoughts in my head, and that's one of his tricks. He'll put thoughts in my head like that, And then he'll stand apart and he'll say those thoughts. And then, based on my belief that only Jesus knows a man's thoughts, those thoughts were never mine. If it happened to you, those were never your thoughts. They were not generated by your mind, by the activity and the mental structure that you have been given. They were never your thoughts. It was an attack, a rape. And then the
we
devil
have a different mental structure than you, right? So, I mean, our thoughts, we can't necessarily project our thought process onto you and vice versa, right? Whatever is going on in your mind is unique to you, right? So, for me, when I have intrusive thoughts, when I have things that pop into my head that I don't like, I am able to shut them up and replace those thoughts quite easily. But I can easily imagine how it could just not be that way, how I could just not be able to do that.
You've had a song get stuck in your head before, right?
Oh, sure.
Some songs are hard to get out of your head.
I was fortunate enough not to get the hard schizophrenia, which is when you see the crazy guys walking down the street pointing at the telephone pole saying purple toaster or pointing at the mailbox.
Position.
That's the hard form of schizophrenia. I have what's called a light form of it. It's like an overactive imagination, and it's very frustrating. It's like my mind is very childish. And
so that's very interesting because
I agree.
You're getting messages or communications from entities that you both don't believe are real and do believe are real.
Well, that's the problem with the disease. If I'm going to try to talk about supernatural things and say I'm schizophrenic at the same time, it obviously opens me up to disbelievers that, how do you know the difference? When you see Jesus, you know it's God. You just know it is. There's just no two ways about it.
If you have the ability to talk to God, right, then you have access to all the information in the universe.
No, not the case. I don't know your thoughts. I never could
you don't,
know
but he
what
does,
your thoughts
and he's talking
are.
to you.
I know that Jesus has been giving visions of all the time that has happened in the history of mankind by the Holy Spirit, not by that electric force of Satan. And I didn't see all of those things. I didn't get to see how the nails were put into the back of his hands and one of his eyes almost popped out, when he was on the cross. I didn't get to see that. The only thing I know about Jesus Christ is what I read in the King James Version of the Bible. And in that Bible, it is written that I will not be given to see the ground. And what that ground is all those angels that everybody can see on the earth even today. I'm like the only one that's not allowed to see it. It's just, I have to do it completely on faith. And I'm a little bit frustrated with Jesus that he would put this iniquity allow this iniquity to be put on me, and yet expect me to somehow or another be a leader and be his representative on earth. I wouldn't hire somebody.
Does Jesus talk to you though? Does Jesus talk to you?
He spoke. The only thing he ever spoke to me in person was when I got high on crack in my apartment in Chicago, and I got down on my knees and I said, I know you want me to have my son. And he appeared sitting on a couch in my apartment with a little child on his lap. And the little child had a red card, a card about the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It was scarlet. It was ruby red. And Jesus said, it is what it is. That's the only time Jesus personally spoke to me. And I was high on crack, but there's no doubt in my mind it was him. I said, I know you want me to have my son. And he said, it is what it is.
So you can understand from our perspective how that's going to be difficult to swallow, right? So, I mean, just try to have a little empathy for us, right? When we are hearing these stories, we're going to have doubts, whatever. But if there's any way for you to give us some kind of confirmation from God or the other side, you could give us information that would be impossible for us to have if you're actually in communication with God.
I asked him many times to send signs. I asked him to heal 2 teeth in everybody's mouth. I asked him to send fish and bread. I asked him to give everyone a little piece of rice that's spiced like meat. I asked him to give all the Hebrews a dreidel on Hanukkah. Little things like that. 2 teeth healed in everybody's mouth. I was at the hospital about half a mile from where I am now. And I asked Jesus to heal, and I believe he healed an open heart surgery right there in the surgery room. And not even the doctors seeing this done in front of them would confess that it really happened. Everyone's just right over their heads. So.
When you saw Jesus, did he look anything like the pictures you've ever seen of him? Like
I saw him 3 times. He was wearing a white robe. He was about 6'3". He had very dark olive skin and black hair down to his shoulders. I saw him on August 25th when a little girl in a playground jumped on a park bench, and she said, "It is he." And I saw Jesus, and he looked at me with an expression in his face that I wasn't doing enough, and I knew it. And then I saw him once when I lifted my hands and said, "Hallelujah, he is here." I saw him over my shoulder standing. And then one time, I'll just put it to you plain as it is on the table. I was in a pub at Wrigley Field in Chicago called Yahtzee's, drawing caricatures, having a pizza. And Jesus was over my shoulder, and he leaned over my shoulder, and he made a peace sign smiling. And he was wearing a Beatles wig. A Beatles wig, Remember John Lennon said, we're bigger than the Beatles? Well, apparently Jesus thinks he's a Beatle.
Well,
so I think Jesus has a great sense of humor. And he also created the heavens and the universe. So he's far more intelligent than I am.
Okay. Well, Wesley, I appreciate you sharing your story with us. I want to get to these questions that I have for Kyle real quick before we let him go. So I want to say goodbye to you, but I just want to say thank you for sharing your story with us. Obviously, I think that, whatever it is that you're interacting with is probably generated from within your own mind. And I hope that you are getting enough help and counseling and psychiatric care, whatever you need, and your medication and whatever you need. So I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that you stay well. And I appreciate you coming on. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you have a great night, Wesley. Bye-bye.
You too.
All right. So let's go ahead and get this going. I just want to ask you a few questions before we let you go. If that's okay, Kyle, unless you're you're steaming to get out of here. So I'm going to ask you some of the questions from the MDD live chat before I go to my questions. This one is from someone named Chloe McLean. So shout out to you. They asked, why did God tell his people to kill a group of others, except for young girls, to keep them for themselves? Sounds like slavery.
Why did God allow other people to die? So,
well, he tell other people to kill.
Why did God tell other people to kill? And so I'm not exactly sure which instance that they are referring to here. So
the Amalekites,
I don't really know. And I can't really say I'm not God, so I can't really speak on and tell you all of his reasoning right there.
Okay. Thank you. Let me go to the next one then. This is from Gigi, who's actually in the live chat right now. Shout out to you, Gigi. They asked, Kyle, do you hate South Park?
Do I hate South Park? I don't watch South Park. Yeah, so.
Not hatred, just indifference. Okay. Well, you got
it's
your
not
answer,
something
Gigi.
I would watch. It's more vulgar than I'd ever watch it. So, yeah. I don't
so there is
a desire to watch
something like hatred.
So I don't say it's hatred. I just have an aversion to it, I guess you could call it. So
they had an entire episode about the start of Mormonism, and then obviously Matt Stone, Trey Parker, they made the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, you should do a reaction to it. I like to watch that.
Yeah, it's kind of vulgar.
We can do it on the show.
I don't do that stuff.
Okay. Another question.
I don't watch rated R movies, so yeah.
Well, this is for Ozien. He's not here anymore, so we'll skip that. For Kyle, do you believe the biblical flood is true as written? From John Ratt.
The biblical flood is true as written. I think there's a lot of evidence for that, and I do believe and I follow the evidence on that. So yeah, I believe it.
There's absolutely zero evidence for it.
okay, so that's defining evidence here. And so, yeah, there's signs or indications. And so I can point to the striped rocks outside my house here. I live really close to Zion, so we get a lot of that. And so I can point to that, and I can call that evidence as a sign or indication, kind of like feeling someone's hot. And so you can say, oh, well, that's not evidence. But again,
So it's evidence, but it's not evidence for.
okay, so we agree that it's evidence.
Okay, so here's
It's just not convincing evidence to you. It just doesn't convince you, and I get that.
Earlier today, I went to the bathroom and I saw that the toilet seat had been pissed all over, right? So I realized this is evidence that somebody peed on the toilet seat, right? And I had a hypothesis of who, right? There's my brother-in-law who lives here, and then there's my son who goes to the bathroom by himself and doesn't need any help, right? And I had just the evidence of the urine on the potty, right? I can't test it, the DNA, or there's no tests I can do, right? So this is evidence, and I could say to either one of those people, this is evidence that you did it. But it's evidence that either of them did it, but it's not evidence of which did it.
I like to say there's convicting evidence, and then there's kind of non-convicting evidence.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. There's many levels to this evidence idea, right? There's just the evidence that something happened, and maybe it's tangentially can be correlated to somebody else, but it doesn't exclude all the other possible criminals, let's say, right? So like when we come to evidence of God, right, we have testimonies. And that's pretty much it. And that is evidence
for you. That's for you. You haven't had the experiences for that.
Well, I've had experiences that I can attribute to other things, like the urine on the toilet seat, right? It doesn't tell me where those ideas come from, those experiences.
Well, you just said all you had was verbal testimonies of other people, right? And so, that's the amount of evidence that you have, and you consider a verbal testimony as evidence. It's just not sufficient evidence to convince you of anything, and I get that. So
okay, let's just move on. Next question I had for you is from Lieutenant Gregory Stevens. They asked for you, Kyle, are we saved by works? Is works proof of salvation? Can you lose your salvation?
Are we saved by works? Jesus said that in answer to who shall be great in the kingdom of heaven, and he pointed to a little child and said, we must be as little children if we want to inherit the kingdom of heaven, right? And I think that alone right there says so much about us. And a child, a little baby, they can't do anything for themselves. Okay, they are entirely dependent upon their parents to take care of them, and so in order to enter into the kingdom of heaven, we have to humble ourselves and allow others to serve us. Okay, we have to be willing to allow the Savior, the Savior's sacrifice, to be applied to us. And so, I think that right there says so much right there.
Okay, that's interesting. Another question, the next one on the list actually was very similar to that. I was asking, do you think works are proof of salvation? If so, how much? And can you lose your salvation? So I think you answered all that pretty much, right?
Well, we have to be like little children. And so if we're not little children and say, oh, well, I'm a big boy, I can do it myself, then we can't get in. There is no other way nor means given whereby man can be saved except for the atoning blood of Jesus Christ.
Okay. Another question from James Wolfe. They wanted to ask you if you're a fan of Battlestar Galactica, which is based on the Latter-day Saints beliefs.
I don't believe I'm a flat earther. So I don't. Yeah, some people might have been inspired by it and decided to come up with other explanations for it. But I think I've seen like a few episodes of Battlestar Galactica, but I didn't really get very far.
You're a flat earther as well, Kyle?
I'm a flat earther. Yeah.
Oh God. Okay.
Well, it's a good show. You should check it out.
I'm going to.
Yeah, definitely. From Gigi, once again, they asked, do you seem to not know many answers, but are they want to know, you don't seem to have a lot of the answers, but you're certain that God exists. Does that make sense to you?
It's kind of like cats eat food. Some cats eat food. I can prove that my cats eat food, and because I've had experiences, I've observed those things. And so, do I know every single kind of food that a cat will and won't eat? No, but I still know that my cat does eat food. That much is provable to me.
Okay. And then another question from James Wolfe. They asked, infinite regression of gods is analogous to the mathematical phenomena of a fraction being ad infinitum, such as a third of 100 being 33.3 repeating.
Okay.
So I guess that's kind of a comment to bolster your points, I think.
I've heard that pi is like an infinite number too. I don't know, but
yeah, there are irrational numbers go on forever. Okay. From James Wolfe, they asked, I thought that classical Latter-day Saint doctrine suggested that we become gods, not that we necessarily are gods. So do we become or are we?
Okay. Okay, we are children of God. So if we are the offspring of God, that means we are inherently gods. Okay. But we can become like our Heavenly Father. And so there's kind of a different kind of concept there of becoming who we are now versus what we can become, a child becoming like their parent. And I think that's what they're talking about.
Okay. From the nihilist, they say approximately 2,500 people die every hour due to starvation. So why does God care to stop the rain from getting him wet?
He's given me one example and of just saying I'm here. And there are people who die of starvation, and that's part of life. And it's kind of an experience, and everyone has their own experiences, and everyone's going to experience suffering. That's part of life, to go through the hard things so we can learn to recognize the good things. And I do believe in a just God. And so there are some really terrible, miserable ways that people can die. And I really believe that God will make it up to them. As terrible as that was, it will be just in the end. They will.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the points in the Bible where it says that this entity or that entity will be annihilated, thrown into the lake of fire, destroyed, apparently, right? How does that square with the idea of eternality for all of these proto-gods?
Destroyed can have multiple meanings. It doesn't necessarily mean poof out of existence or anything like that. Destroyed can also mean okay, I can destroy my car without poofing my car out of existence. Does that make sense? It's no longer functional. And so that's kind of one of the interesting things about the Bible I've kind of learned more recently is the definition of good in the Bible is very frequently whether it is functional or not. And so if it's dysfunctional, that's not good. And if it is good, then it's functional. So, yeah.
So by that definition, Wesley would be not good because his brain is dysfunctional.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that is all of my one more. Sorry. No, that's it. That's all my questions I got. Shout out to Gigi for reminding me to ask you that. I really appreciate it. So Kyle, tell everybody where they can find you and what they'll see when they get there.
I've got a YouTube channel. It's just called Kyle Adams, and I mostly talk about flat Earth, but I do have a whole series on gospel insights. It's just a playlist, and every time I make a new one, I just add it to that. And but normally they're not quite as specific, I guess you could say. I don't normally, this is kind of outside my normal bubble space. When I end up doing a lot of my gospel insights much more non-denominational, reaching a broader audience, but all of a sudden today I'm like, okay, this is like very, very specific, very not non-denominational. And so I don't know, I just kind of felt like doing that today. I felt like,
got it. And I want to say also, oh sorry, go ahead, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say that it was a point that I felt like needed to be brought up because I haven't seen anyone else bring that up. And I had to be the first.
Okay, well, we really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you standing for the gauntlet here answering all these questions from all these atheists, and just maintaining your composure and being very cordial. And I just really say I appreciate that.
You guys have been
I
very
appreciate
polite
you.
too. So.
And
I had
I
no
really hope that
reason to
you
not
come
be
back.
polite.
Well,
I
it's
think I'm gonna
nice to find
make a
people who
t-shirt
are
for
interested in this stuff.
theist
Yeah.
guests.
Yeah,
You,
it's
stood the
really
gauntlet.
nice to find people who are interested in this stuff, and that's like, I pray for these kind of opportunities, seriously, to find people who would be interested in learning more, talking to about this kind of stuff. And so yeah, you guys are an answer to a prayer.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate that then. Again, you're welcome to come by anytime you want. Want to say, and Malavia, do you have a channel yet, or what's going on with that?
No, I just have a few of my gaming videos on my channel. They're
Okay.
not very long, not very in depth or anything.
Well, I'll throw them in the description if you want me to. No problem.
Go ahead.
I really appreciate you joining me, man. Thanks again for coming by.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So
I'd love to keep joining.
yeah, definitely. And want to remind everybody, if you're a YouTube member or a Patreon member, the link to the backstage on all my shows is going to be there, so you can join me either during the discussion if it's an after show open mic type thing, or after the show if it's not. But either way, really appreciate it, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. Had a lot of fun. This is good. Kyle's linked in the description below. Hopefully Brenda and Malavia and anybody else who's on the show will send me their links, and they'll be there too later. Have a great night, and remember, it's the bridges we build, not the bridges we burn, that give us the edge. Y'all have a great night.